Most of the time, when our social interactions in Thailand encounter hiccups, it's not because of there's animosity on the Thais' part because of our faux pas. It's simply because there are cultural and worldview differences that we may or may not be aware of. This is part two of some of the do's that we can do to help those social interactions go more smoothly. When in Rome, when we're on the road here in Thailand and we want to merge, let's say from one lane to another or from a smaller lane to a larger one, there's some things we're expected to do here that if we did them in, let's say, a place like California, this might lead to road rage or even gunfire. Well, let me tell you how it's done here. The concept of merging here is something that really doesn't exist. Basically, if you're ahead, you don't slow down to let somebody get in front of you. That's just the way people look at things here. So how would you ever merge? You might wait to merge for a half an hour before they'll let you go in. And that's what will happen unless you do this. Basically, when you're trying to merge, what you do is you put your turn signal on and go little by little, inch by inch, into the other person's lane. Now, this is basically cutting the other person off because eventually you're going to get far enough into their lane where they're going to have to stop. And then when they stop, you merge into that lane. Now, that's a concept in the West, especially in America, which is unheard of. That's what would cause road rage in, let's say, a place like California. But here, you're expected to do that. You're expected to inch by inch into the other person's lane until they stop, and then they let you in. And then everything's copacetic. A lot of expats elect to ride motorcycles here as their means of transportation. It's cheaper than owning a car, and it's pretty convenient, although it can be more dangerous if you're not careful. I have a couple of things I want to suggest, a couple of do's that you can do to make your motorcycle life here a little safer and more convenient. The first one is, when you get on your motorcycle, you get ready to go somewhere, put a long sleeve shirt on or a jacket. Now, it might be 108 degrees, but that's the reason for wearing the jacket. The sun here is really strong. And for the Thais who are darker skinned, it may not be that much of a problem. But for some light skinned expats, it can be. Now, I have 3 or 4 friends here who have gotten skin cancer, and that's something you may want to avoid. Now, the Thais may wear long sleeves and even sometimes even gloves to avoid darkening their skin. Well, expats may have a different reason for wearing long sleeves, but it will really make a difference. You don't want to get skin cancer. Another safety precaution you can do is to always wear a helmet. My motorcycle won't start unless I have my helmet on. Oh, of course, that's not built into the motorcycle, that's me. Back in 1980, when I was writing for the Bangkok Post, I was doing feature articles. I saw that there was a problem here. Very, very few people wore helmets. And I thought that was pretty dangerous. So I started doing some research, and I went to the hospital, the local government hospital here. I went to a ward that had motorcycle accidents. They were in bed, and a number of them were in comas. So I talked to the doctor there and I said, just give me a statistic. What do you think? How many of these people would be in comas if they were wearing motorcycle helmets? And he said, probably 98% of them would be fine. Wearing a helmet's a big deal. It's also the law. And if you're stopped, and there are lots of stops where the police will have a roadblock and stop every motorcycle coming by, they'll check for your registration, but they'll also check for your helmet. If you're not wearing a helmet, you'll be fined between $400 and $800. Sometimes that changes. But that's not the reason for wearing a helmet. Wearing a helmet is really important. Now, every culture has a series of hand gestures that have meaning. You know, this, or this, or a couple of others that we won't do right here. But what if I were to do this to you? What does that mean in your culture? Well, in my culture, it means either hello or goodbye. Now, you can have a little bit of a faux pas here in Thailand because this does not mean hello or goodbye here. This means come here, come here. If you want to get a taxi in Bangkok, he's driving by and you want to wave to him, you don't do this, you do this. If you have a friend who's across the room and you want your friend to come here, you don't do this. They don't know what that means. That you do this. It means come here. It's the come hither wave. And so if somebody does that to you, you don't wave back, hello. No, that's not what they mean. What they mean is they want you to join them. So when I first got here, I'd made that mistake maybe 100 times until I realized that I was misunderstanding the hand gesture. Now, this is a social interaction that can cause a lot of discomfort, especially for a Westerner. Quite often, when you meet an old friend, somebody you haven't seen in a while, and you're greeting each other, your friend might say something like this, and I'm repeating something that was said to me. Hi, you've gotten really fat. Or, hey, your hair's really turning gray, isn't it? Now, what? Of course, in the West, if you did that, that would be the end of your conversation. It might even be the end of your friendship. But in Thailand, it's a normal thing. They're observing maybe how you've changed since they last saw you. They're not criticizing you. They're just observing, well, you've gained a couple of kilos since I last saw you, or your hair's turning a bit grayer than when I last remembered. They're not insulting you, although it surely feels like one. So let it pass. You might even do the same to them. You might say, well, you've gotten a little fatter too. And they'll be fine. Nobody will be insulted. And that's just a typical greeting. So don't let it get you down. The last do for today is not really a social interaction. It's more like how do you keep yourself safe and healthy? And that's to keep the creepy crawlers out of your house. Now, most of us live in a house with screens, screen doors, screened windows. Keep them closed. There are lots of things that are living outside that you don't want to have inside your house. Mainly mosquitoes and other bugs. There's also lizards and snakes and centipedes and stuff like that. You may want to keep that out of your house. And the screens will do a good job for you. When I first got here, I I lived in a house without any screens, so I had to sleep under a mosquito net. That was kind of tricky because I would shut off the lights and I would be attacked by flying insects, bugs, usually big giant cockroaches, that would climb into my hair, and I'd have to knock them away before I jumped out under my mosquito net. That's something that I haven't encountered in a while because I live in screened houses now. So you may want to keep them closed. But I want to tell one story that you're probably aware of, but we weren't. We were Peace Corps volunteers, and we came up to Chiang Mai. It was our first night in Chiang Mai, and I slept in a sort of a spare room in the school. And one of our friends, she was at the hospital, but she stayed at one of the nurses' quarters. And the next morning we met for breakfast. You know, it's still our first day in Chiang Mai. And we all asked, how did it go last night? And she said, well, everything was fine until all these things started crawling out all over the walls. And we said, oh, wow, really? And she said, yeah, but I took care of them. I used my shoe and I squashed them all. And then we realized she was talking about house lizards or geckos, an onomatopoetic word that Thais use for house lizards are tukke for the big ones and jingchok for the little ones. Now the tukkes you might want to keep out of your house. They're huge. The jingchoks you might want to attract into your house because they eat all the mosquitoes. And they're really good to have. So except for the jingchokes, keep the creepy crawlers out of your house.